But it's a pleasure to be here in the Nexus breakout room with all of you. This is round two, and the fun and the games continue here. We're gonna take you on board for a co-created 40-minute session where we'll start off watching a video. We'll be playing a game, and we will end up with some questions and reflections from yourselves. My name is Matt. I'm the Nexus Academy coordinator, signing in from New York. I'll be supported by expert Hugh McLeeman and Vibes officers Natalie and Shay. Maybe you could all give a quick wave to everybody so they can put a face to you. Hi everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces as well. I see Angelica Bowman had a great hand in creating the academy, delivering it. A lot of good people in the room here. So welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Natalie, are we ready to run the first video that will talk a little bit about what the Nexus Academy is?
$274 million people will need humanitarian assistance and protection this year. Crises like conflict, poverty, and food insecurity mean funding requirements for humanitarian operations have risen to $41 billion. A 400% increase in the past decade. We must reverse this trend. When humanitarian development and peace responses to crisis are aligned, we stand the greatest chance of overcoming its root causes and paving a lasting pathway out of the crisis and fragility. That is what we call the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus.
You can't address the root causes without simultaneously working on the peace side, the security side, the local governance issues, and providing life-saving humanitarian response.
Nexus Academy builds on the OECD DAC recommendation on the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus. It's a learning journey that creates shared cross-agency understanding of Nexus approaches.
These people need our support right now. They don't need just a school or a hospital, but they really need our integrated support.
The peace domain has to own it, humanitarian domain has to own it, and the development domain has to own it, and together we all move in one direction.
Experts share practical ideas that accelerate implementation in a digital campus and act on joined-up global to local support for policy, partnerships and programs. Nexus Academy.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed that little clip there. And that is really what the Nexus Academy is all about. We need better coherence and complementarity between humanitarian development and peace actions for better impact at country levels with, of course, people at the center. Now, what does that mean, and why should we seek that? How do we do it? Those are some of the questions that we will be seeking to answer in the game that will be coming up shortly. So yes, let's play a game to unpack why a Nexus approach is critical to our work. And this will be another opportunity for you to earn tokens that will be added to your dashboard. You did earn some points when signing up to this event. This is another opportunity to add to those. I'm going to ask Natalie and Shay to put the link to the game in the chat. And the first thing you'll do when you enter the quiz is enter your name. And then we will move to the first question, which is a quite practical one. We're going to be asking what your email address is, so that we can link that to your token, or link that to your profile, so you can continue to gain points. I see that the numbers are rising. People are coming in. There's a lot of people in this room. So it's good to see the activity in the quiz already. Let's give people a moment, Natalie, just to get their names in before we start the actual quiz, and then they can type in their email addresses. Again, we will only use this to add tokens to your Crisis Academy dashboard after the game, so you can take part in the competition.
So do we have to click on the start?
I know Natalie is going to help us with that. If you've put in your name, you just have to stay put for now. And then Natalie will be clicking the start button in a bit, and then you can enter your email address.
I don't see a place to put a name.
Omar here.
Me neither, by the way. I don't see a place to put the name.
Colleagues, Dr. Suman, you have to click on the link given.
Find a place to put my name too.
The chat
Join
box.
my quiz. Is it
Okay.
joinmyquiz.com? Is it this one?
If you click on the link in the chat, it will, Natalie and
Yeah,
Shay, if I could ask you to
I
click
got
on
it.
that.
Yes. Don't click on the.
Thank you, I got it.
Yeah, don't click on the screen. Go to the chat box.
You click on the link to the quiz, and then you should be able to enter.
No, I'm not.
I can't find a place to put my name.
You click the link to the quiz, and then you should be able to enter your.
The link is in the chat. Don't worry about the link that you see on screen. Go to the chat and look at the link there.
I'm not
Where can I
seeing
get
it.
the link? I can't see the link.
Me neither.
The link in the chat box.
It's okay if there are any tech challenges and you're not able to navigate to either joinmyquiz.com with this game code or the link in the chat box. The game will be available to you afterwards, and so just follow along on screen for now.
But I don't see the question.
Thank you, Osman Bhai.
All right, Natalie, I think we can give it a go. Are you ready to press start? Now, this is where you add your email address so that we can link that to your dashboard so you can continue to collect points. Get your answers in there. We have about 50 seconds left. It's good to see the numbers are rising. We've reached about 170 of 200, so keep them coming. 20 seconds left. See, we have a couple of distinguished guests on this breakout session as well. Welcome, Ma, the Secretary General Special Coordinator for Development in the Sahel, Asako Okai, the Crisis Bureau, UNDP Crisis Bureau Director. Welcome to you as well. All right, good to see all of you getting your answers in there. I think we are ready to move on to the first question, or the first real questions. It's number 2, but the first real question in this quiz. And for that, I am going to hand over to our Nexus expert, Hugh.
Thanks, Mac. Welcome, everyone. Okay, fingers on buttons. This is where it really gets serious. And okay, what it's all about. So It's about need. Crisis-related needs continue to outstrip our resources. So, how much has the ask for meeting needs gone up since the beginning of this year? Is it 10 billion, 21 billion, 30 billion, 50 billion? We've got 22 seconds left. So, 10 billion, 20 billion. And the number of people, 104 million people, 180 million people, 309 million people. So testing your general understanding here of why are we doing this Nexus stuff. Down to the last 3 seconds, 2, 1. Okay, time's up. So those of you who answered correctly, it was 50 billion. The last global humanitarian overview identified the need for 50 billion in 2022. It just went up from September. So we're really in a period of exponential growth in need. 309 million people in need today. So just to put that in perspective, 10 years ago, the humanitarian needs overview was 9 billion. So it's risen from 9 billion to 50 billion in 10 years. Okay, so I see most of you got that right. Well done, 115 people who have a good understanding of the HNO. Okay, fingers on buttons, ready for the next question. I think this is going to be Mac who's taking you through this one.
Indeed. Next question is coming up. The HDP Nexus is a what? Is it a strategy? Is it a program? Is it a project? Or is it an approach? Get your answers in there. I hope you've been able to make it over to the link and can put in your answers so you can start to collect, or so you can continue to collect your points. I see the answers are coming up. Let's have a look at the leaderboard. I see we have a lot of right answers here. 145 saying that it's that it's an approach. I think that's very pleasant to see, because indeed that is how we define it. Our understanding comes from the OECD DAC recommendation on the HDP Nexus, which outlines 11 principles across coordination, programming, and financing. This recommendation came into life in February 2019, and the Nexus Academy was launched 3 years later on February 2022. And tomorrow we actually have the closing session for the third cohort, which consists of multilateral, bilateral, or a cohort which consists of participants from multilateral, bilateral, and non-governmental organizations. In the recommendation, in the DAC recommendation on HDP Nexus, it's defined as an approach. That doesn't imply a merging of programs or integration of HDP actors and actions, but better coordination, coherence, and complementarity between them. A common misconception is that we can set up one overall Nexus program. It's not about that. It's rather about coordinating on joint analysis and strategic planning towards collective outcomes. It's about ensuring that programming is responsive to this analysis and to the wider risk environment where the needs and aspirations of affected people are at the center. And it's about putting financing front and center of this to ensure that collective outcomes are realistic and achievable. With that, I think we're ready for the next question, and I will be handing back to Hugh for that.
Okay, so this is where it gets tough, because there's more than one answer to this question. So there's multiple choice question, and pick as many as you think are correct. So a Nexus approach prioritizes what? Prevention always, development wherever possible, humanitarian action when necessary, or humanitarian action always. So pick as many of these statements as you think are correct. Okay, I can see answers coming in. You've got a little over 30 seconds. So again, because many of these statements that you think are true. Okay, we're down to the last 20 seconds. Trickier question, this one. Okay, the last 10 seconds. We've given you a bit longer for this. Clock's ticking. Down to the last 5. Not all of you have answered yet. You've got to secure your tokens. Okay, time's up. Okay, looking at the leaderboard, we've still not much change in the leaderboard here. We've still got, okay, so we've got most people picking the first 3. So prevention always, development wherever possible, humanitarian action when necessary. And those are indeed the correct answers. So this is what the DAC recommendation emphasizes, is that we need to do prevention always. Whatever we do, we need to prevent these crises happening. Development wherever possible. It's possible in even some of the most fragile contexts to really do that longer term programming. We have to reduce those risks and address the vulnerabilities over time, right beside humanitarian action, meeting people's immediate needs. So that's what the Nexus is really about. It is a way of working in these fragile contexts that prioritizes prevention, development where possible, and humanitarian action where necessary. And if you look at the DAC recommendation, that's really at the heart of the recommendation. But it's been slow getting this approach happening, I guess. And, you know, it's now 4 years since that recommendation was passed. And what we can see from the first question is that over that 4 years, the needs continue to rise. What I said before, 50 billion in 2022 humanitarian needs overview. And I think you'll find when the next global humanitarian overview is launched on the 1st of December this year, we'll see a further exponential rise in need and financing to meet that need. So we can't just do business as usual. We need to do things differently. This is why the DAC came together to develop this recommendation on the Nexus, and why this is a unique recommendation, because it brings together not just the 30 donors who provide 168 billion per year in aid, but it brings together the UN system as well. And they came together to form the DAC UN dialogue, which has really been the driving force behind the Nexus Academy. It's a global good delivered by the DAC and by the 8 adherents to the OECD recommendation on the Nexus. And really it was developed so that we have a common understanding as to what the Nexus is between bilateral actors, between the UN system, between NGOs, between fragile states themselves, and that people really have the skills and the knowledge and that shared understanding to translate these principles that Mac referred to into actual concrete actions on the ground. It wouldn't have been possible unless it got the support from the Crisis Academy, what the launch here today, as well as the tremendous sort of contributions from all of the DAC members and all of the UN adherents who have come together to develop the Nexus Academy. So maybe we go back to our leaderboard and look at where we are in overall. Okay. So Matthias, are these all from Nexus Academy? They are. Christine Chan, I can see from some names who I recognize who have been studying up on the Nexus. So hopefully you can see one of your names there. So Matthias has got 4 out of 4. Many of them 4 out of 4 for things right. Okay, so here we have the winners. Matthias, step forward for your gold medal. Robert Fort and Raya. I hope I've pronounced Raya correctly. So hopefully that was some fun to really sort of to get your brains working, if you like. And hopefully you're now sort of all Nexus champions or want to be Nexus champions after that. But I think, you know, what's clear from the game, I mean, it's really a light way to sort of introduce you to the Nexus and what the Nexus Academy is trying to do. But I think the overarching message that we tried to get across really from those questions is really that we need to do things differently. Things are getting worse. The number of frequency and intensity of crises is going up. The number of people in need is going up. And the number of resources required to meet those people's immediate needs are going up. So we need to interrupt this cycle. We need to reduce needs over time. We need to address the risks that are driving these crises. And we need to address people's vulnerability to these crises. But to do that, we really need a common understanding of what that looks like. How do we do things differently together? And that's really what the Nexus Academy is about, to try to build that common understanding between bilateral actors, UN agencies, NGOs, and fragile states themselves, and really bring them together into the one platform to do that, supported by all of those actors as well, and co-created by those actors. And why are we doing it? Because, as I said before, we need to do things differently. And what Mac pointed out, there is a lack of clarity about what a Nexus approach is. And really, it's important to point out that it's not about the merging of humanitarian action, development, and peace. It's about people doing things in the right places at the right time, and where possible, simultaneously. Beside that crisis response, we really need to have that longer term programming that reduces those risks and vulnerabilities around time. But to work in the same space at the same time, we really need more coordination. We need more coherence between what we do, and our programming needs to be more complementary. So it's really a common sense approach what the Nexus Academy takes, to look at what tools and approaches do you need to bring that complementarity to programming if we're all working in the same space at the same time to address crises and fragility. It's not about reducing humanitarian financing. Sometimes it comes down to this, people criticize it as, well, the Nexus is just about shifting resources from one place to another. It's really about ensuring that the right financing is happening at the right time. So ensuring that we are meeting immediate needs, but that we stop those needs growing and prevent the crises happening at the same time. We've got to change our way of working so that we have more impact at a country level too. The coordination mechanisms that we have are siloed. We work in humanitarian country teams. We work in donor coordination teams at the country level. We have humanitarian country teams. We really need to look at how we modernize our coordination structures, if you like, if we're really going to work more effectively together. So it really is about looking at that country level way of working to make sure that everything that we're doing is really focused on the most vulnerable. If we're not doing work that really addresses the needs of the most vulnerable, then we're not doing our job. To do that, we need to work to our comparative advantage, our respective comparative advantages. As I said before, it's not about a big soup of everybody doing everything. It's about ensuring that those agencies who have a comparative advantage to do something at a particular point in time are working to that comparative advantage. So making sure that we're clear about what each other's roles and responsibilities are, what our mandates are, and ensuring that those are linked between global, regional, and national level to ensure, again, that we are really meeting the needs of the most vulnerable people. It's also about changing the relationship between multilateral actors and bilateral actors. If you look at ODA flows, most ODA for humanitarian action goes through the multilateral system and through NGOs. But if you look at longer term development programming in fragile contexts, most of it is programmed bilaterally. So we really need to change the relationship between the multilateral system and the bilateral system. So it's much more programmatic and strategic relationship. It's not just a funding relationship. We really need to have those strategic programmatic discussions between bilateral actors, governments, and the UN system to ensure that the longer term programming, which is mainly bilateral or governmental, is complementary with the humanitarian programming, which is primarily through NGOs and through the UN system. And that's, again, why coordination is so important at a country level. So what does the Nexus Academy do? It brings together all of those actors into the same forum, into an open forum where we can have those discussions about how we work together more closely and how we have that different relationship at a country level. And it's really the only platform that does do that, that brings together the UN system, bilaterals and NGOs into that discussion. And it's very much a co-created journey is what we talk about, where each time we run the Nexus Academy, we draw on the expertise of those who are in the room to start to solve some of these problems that we're facing around coordination between humanitarian development and peace actors, between the multilateral system, the bilateral system, governments and NGOs, so that we can really have that open and frank conversation over a number of weeks and ensure that people not only have that conversation, but are equipped with a shared understanding of what it looks like and have access to the right tools and approaches and a shared understanding of how to deploy those, if you like. So I think that's probably enough of an introduction to the Nexus Academy. I would encourage you, there's a short course linked to the Nexus Academy that you can do as an introduction, if you like. Those of you who haven't been through the Nexus Academy yet, it will be running for a number of years. So do look at places that are available to be on that Nexus Academy. Certainly the feedback of the participants we've had so far has been very good. And again, just to say, you know, the Crisis Academy has been a really important support to the Nexus Academy, but it is really a unique training that is offered by the DAC members and by all of the UN agencies who have adhered to this DAC recommendation and delivered jointly by all of those agencies, and many of them are on the call here today, of IOM, UNICEF, UNHCR. I wish I hadn't started this because I'll forget somebody. UNFPA, UNDP, WFP. I think that might be all. Okay, Mac, over to you.
Thank you, Hugh. So the big picture is we need better coherence and complementarity between humanitarian development and peace actions for strengthened impact at country levels, with people at the center. That was reflected in your summary there, but I also see some of the comments coming into the chat touching upon that from Angelica, from Leica and more. We have about 15 minutes now for an open floor where anyone can raise any thoughts, questions, comments. You're very welcome to use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we can do a little line of people who want to come in. But this is your opportunity to be part of the conversation. Maybe we'll start by putting Angelica a little bit on the spot. Angelica, do you want to come in and elaborate on the points that you put in the chat?
I'll be happy to. I didn't want to raise my hand to be the first one to speak, but I love and live by the Nexus, and I think it's a paradox in itself, because it has to be based on the context. So we can't have one approach for everything. I keep saying it's a bit like pizza. You can't have the same pizza for everyone. Depends on what are the ingredients in the place you are. What are the stakeholders? What do you have to put on there? And that's a bit the HDPN approach. But it's about being open. It's about knowing the key partners in the area and trying to participate and work as one, which is always very difficult, especially if you're competing for funding, you're competing, you know, with your own personalities, etc. But humble, listen, understand what people need. And when I mean people, I mean young girls have different needs from old men, and Trans people have different needs from people with disabilities, and we have to ensure that we give everyone what they need to enhance their, fulfillment of the Human Rights Charter, basically, to empower people to live a full life. I give over now. I'm sure there's someone who's put up their hand, but I could, as you know, and you, Mac, I could talk 3 hours about the Nexus. So
indeed, there are a couple of hands up, and thank you very much for that, for kicking off with that, Angelica. Much appreciated. We have Raya next on our list.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mac. Hi, everyone. My name is Raya. I work on Nexus Aspect. I'm with UNFP in New York. It's great to be with you all. So my question to colleagues, to you is the political aspect of Nexus. We see a more and more polarized world, and having the 3 pillars working together, there are some political aspects, and we see this when sometimes we develop a country program in a country, in a recovery phase, or sometimes when you have an HRP and country program at the same time. So how do we more and more focus on the political aspect? Because these days the political aspects are, hand in hand with the programmatic aspect, and we have 3 pillars with different approaches, especially also the peace aspect. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Raya. I think we'll take a couple of questions and comments, and then we can get back to them in one go. Next up, we have Vijay.
Hi, thank you for this. I think this is a question for the group, and for those of us who've actually been to the field and with you working with country teams and RCOs. I think there's a huge, and this is something that came out in the strategic plan as well, how UNDP has left its coordination role with the RCO, and how we now fit in with the new dilemma on the ground that we're more independent of the resident coordinator's office, but we still have to play a role in having a one UN country approach and doing things together, and also gives us an opportunity to do partnerships. And also, the RCO is a different institution and being within itself, which leads to competition between us and other agencies for fundraising, for doing projects, and also being able to be flexible in doing sort of vertical and horizontal partnerships, with and having the freedom to do it, to do relationships with UNICEF, UNHCR, and other organizations where we're doing the crossover humanitarian. So I think it's something that it'll be interesting to see, and the guidelines coming in on how we do these partnerships in a very competitive environment, and the new RCO in the structure.
Thank you, Vijay. So some comments there on the role of the RCO and how the partnerships can be leveraged for this, and what sort of guidance could support that. We'll do one more question for this first round from Guri, and then maybe Hugh would also like to come in on some of on these questions and comments. Guri, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Mac, and hi, everyone. And just to the 3 quick observations, I think, and we've already touched on them, but just to reinforce them, I think equity, engendering, as well as inclusion remain the most important overarching issues across the entire intervention. The second is, of course, the complementarity and our working together and to basically reduce the duplication of efforts. And thirdly, I have this question, and it's been on my mind for a very long time, that if we can have a better word than Nexus, somehow Nexus doesn't, I don't know, it kind of jars with the vision of, our vision of the development as well as the humanitarian. So just a question for everyone. Thank you so much, Mac. Let's see.
Thank you, Guri. I put in the chat maybe coherent humanitarian development and peace solutions is an alternative.
That sounds better. Yes.
Word that could be used. Now, the two other questions, one on politics and peace. Some of the messages that have come out in the academy sessions is the importance of thinking and acting politically as well as putting or as well as the primacy of politics. Certainly something that's been discussed. And the second question on RCO, the role of RCO, and on how partnerships can be leveraged, what sort of guidance can support that? Hugh, do you want to come in and give some of those a go?
Sure, but hopefully I'm not the only one with the answers on the call. Right, I couldn't agree with you more about the political context that you mentioned, and absolutely, you know, we can't solve these crises or resolve some of these crises without political engagement. And I think over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a failure of track one diplomacy. Basically, states are no longer willing to use diplomatic tools or are not using diplomatic tools effectively to try to resolve these conflicts. And if you look at the DAC recommendation, you know, it's not all about aid. One of the principles talks about enhancing the use of diplomatic tools and ensuring that the use of diplomatic tools is more complementary with humanitarian action and development to try to achieve peace. So the Nexus is not all about aid. It goes beyond aid and looks at some of these other instruments that we have. But to be honest, of the triple Nexus, you know, there's still a hell of a lot of confusion and lack of consensus around the peace pillar. For many people, the peace pillar, that you see it as things like building social cohesion and some of these very important things that happen through development work. But for others, it's very much about what I would describe as the harder elements of peace, the diplomacy, defense, intelligence. And I think we do need to bring in these things and work out how we work together. But it's very difficult because it's difficult amongst humanitarian development actors, but bringing in those sorts of actors who work in very different ways, not in projectized ways in the way in which we do is challenging. Vijay, I won't comment on UNDP too much because I'm not UNDP, but I agree with you. I mean, it's sort of, you know, UNDP is in a brave new world since delinking, and I think there are opportunities in that for UNDP. I mean, UNDP still very much has this integrator role, and I think sort of making sure that that integrator role is effective is really important, because unless the sorts of capacities and expertise that UNDP has to do this longer term programming, its relationship with governments over a long period of time is really important for the Nexus, because the Nexus is about bringing those longer term solutions to reduce risks and reduce vulnerabilities beside humanitarian action, you know, where possible in the same space. So UNDP has a really important role in that place. And lastly, Guri, Nexus. Couldn't agree more. I hate the word. And I think it's been useful over the last 5 years as a shorthand for what we're talking about, which is sort of more coherent and complementary programming in crisis contexts. But it is just that, it's shorthand, and hopefully we'll get to the point where, you know, there's a systems change and a behavior change in the way in which we work, and then we won't need the word Nexus anymore. We won't need that shorthand because the system will have changed. We will be working differently, and then we can stop this endless discussion of the Nexus, and I think that would be the best outcome, if you like.
Thank you, Hugh. We have about 3 minutes left, so I think we could probably manage one more question. I see Ali, you have your hand up. Would you like to come in and be part of the conversation? You are on mute. So if you could unmute, that'd be fantastic. Still cannot hear you. may possibly be a problem with your microphone on your headset.
Ali, sorry, we can't hear you. Maybe you can type the question in the chat, either here or in the plenary.
If you try to do that, Ali, we'll jump to Andrew instead. Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me very loud.
Loud and clear.
Yes, yeah, I come from a crisis country. I think I work in South Sudan. Many of you know the situation in South Sudan. About a few months ago, I was in Libya, another crisis country, and in these kind of fragile states, you find a lot of challenges, especially in terms of how we can be able to really reduce the vulnerability and be able to rebuild people's life. And a lot of that has got to do in a political setting. And in many of these particular country, fragile state you find is led by a mission. That is, and in a country where you have a mission leading, the development partners are mainly focus on programming focus, and the leadership in terms of the political leadership goes to the mission. Sometimes we face challenges in terms of the issue of coherence and how we can be able to work together in terms of really building up resilience and people's life along those different aspects. Because then the environment also, when you have particularly the humanitarian situations that is worsened, it becomes even more complicated. That's where the nexus comes in terms of how best can the humanitarian, the development, as well as the mission setting can be able to really engage in a way that would enable the national government to function. Because I think this is where the challenge is in terms of the leadership of the national government in some of these countries. And how best can they be able to provide that level of leadership that can allow the mission as well as the development and humanitarian to be able to take forward support to the people who are really at the worst of situation. There are a lot of challenges that these countries face, both in terms of humanitarian crisis, but also in terms of the human rights. Perhaps the human right is perhaps the biggest challenge that many of these countries that I work in really faces. And so the idea that you need to build up such a level of clarity in terms of building the institutions. Those institutions are the one that should be able to really help and direct agencies in terms of where and what to be able to do. And you also find that the challenges along with these institutions is that there are weak capacities along those institutions that needed to be strengthened. And I think this is where really the idea of really collaborations comes in terms of strengthening. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for capturing a lot there. The complexities, the leadership, the importance of leadership in these contexts. Much appreciated. We have time for one last comment from Sumit before we before we close this session.
Thank you for this great opportunity, sir. So my one question is that after this COVID-19 and after this Ukraine war, although this OECD DAC 11 principles are very good, but we can realize now that world has been divided into the two sides, and on these conditions, these 11 principles are really are obeyed, or on the basis of these principles, these donor countries are going to donate all finance on this nexus. It is the great challenge, I think. What do you think?
Thank you, Sumit. I mean, the DAC recommendation, it has 11 principles on coordination, programming, and financing, and they're really all common sense. It's about better coordination. It's about understanding the context better through coordination around joint analysis, coordination around joined up planning. It's about making sure that the programming is adaptable and responsive to the local context. And then it's about making sure that the programming is realistic and achievable through financing. So I think the DAC recommendation itself is common sense and quite uncontroversial. It should really be how we should all be working. But I don't know, Hugh, if you have any final comments on that before we close the session.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to, if we had endless time to discuss this, because this is a really interesting question. The comments by Andrew and by Robert Foote in the chat and by Sumit, they touch on the same question in a way, and it's the importance of national leadership and whether the fact that the OECD has been involved in the Nexus recommendation means that it's a certain worldview. What I would say is the recommendation was convened by the DAC, I would say, and certainly many different stakeholders, being UN agencies, NGOs, as well as G7 plus countries, actually fed in to into the development of the recommendations of these principles. But also too, we see a Nexus approach. We see demand from, Arab state governments have requested Nexus training for their own national civil service from the Economic and Social Commission in Western Asia. We see in East Africa, EGAD supporting its member states around capacities to advance a Nexus approach. We see ECOWAS and SILS in West Africa supporting its member states and demand from its member states to implement and have the capacities to take a Nexus approach. So I don't think it's a Western construct, because the demand is there from many governments around the region to take that leadership, take that ownership, and to have the capacities to actually to work in this way, in a joined up complementary way. So I know we're out of time, so I'll stop there.
All right. Well, with that, thank you all for co-creating this wonderful session. You will automatically be directed to the main room shortly. Don't leave the meeting. We'll be taking a 10-minute break before we continue with the actual ceremony, where we'll hear from UNDP's leadership about the future forward, a future forward approach to crisis. So stay tuned, everyone. Enjoy the break, and see you back in the plenary in about 10 minutes, or online back in the plenary in about 10 minutes. Make sure to not only leave the room. If you want to jump in there now, don't leave the meeting, just leave the room, and then you'll be good to go. See you all.
We will be
soon.
using scissors on the other side to cut the ribbon, so don't miss it. At the hour.
On the blue button.
Thank you, Nexifiers.
Thank you for the session. Thanks a lot.
In about 10
See you in the
minutes.
main
See you all
room.
there.
See you in the
Thanks,
main-
everyone.